Hello and welcome to my channel, and welcome to a Sunday morning meetup in which I discuss 10 British novels from the 1950s. The 10 novels I've picked to represent each year of the 1950s serve to dispel the myths of the peaceful, family-oriented 1950s, when happy homemakers wearing aprons and kitten heels greeted their white-collar husbands at the door with a cocktail and a kiss. Book number 1 was published in 1950. The Grass is Singing by Doris Lessing. This was Lessing's debut novel, which caused a sensation when first published, during dealing as it does with the racial politics of 1940s Southern Africa. Mary Turner, a racist white woman who believes in white supremacy over the native blacks, adopts a superior and contemptuous attitude towards them. Eventually she is killed by her black servant for monetary gain. Doris Lessing is best remembered for her 1962 novel The Golden Notebook. Among other themes, The Golden Notebook is an examination of the growing sexual and women's liberation movements. Doris Lessing received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2007, 57 years after the publication of The Grass is Singing. Also published in 1950 was A Town Like Alice, which is a romance novel by Nevil Shute, published when Shute had newly settled in Australia. Jean Paget, a young Englishwoman, becomes romantically interested in a fellow prisoner of World War II in Malaya, and after liberation emigrates to Australia to be with him, where she attempts, by investing her substantial financial inheritance, to generate economic prosperity in a small outback community, to turn it into a town like Alice, i.e. Alice Springs. The story falls broadly into 3 parts. In post-World War II London, Jean Paget, a secretary in a leather goods factory, is informed by solicitor Noel Strachan that she has inherited a considerable sum of money from an uncle she never knew. Jean decides that her priority is to build a well in a Malayan village. The second part of the story flashes back to Jean's experience during the war, when she was working in Malaya at the time the Japanese invaded and was taken prisoner together with a group of women and children. The third part of the book shows how Jean's entrepreneurship gives a decisive economic impact to develop Willstown in Australia into a town like Alice. Other British novels published in 1950 include Gormenghast by Mervyn Peake and Some 10 Gazelle, which was Barbara Pym's first novel. Book number 2 was published in 1951. The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham is a post-apocalyptic novel. After most people in the world are blinded by an apparent meteor shower, an aggressive species of plant starts killing people. This novel established Wyndham as an important writer and remains his best-known novel. The protagonist is Bill Mason, a biologist who has made his living working with Triffids, tall, venomous, carnivorous plants capable of locomotion. Due to his background, Mason suspects they were bioengineered in the USSR and accidentally released into the wild. Because of the excellent industrial quality of an oil produced by and obtained from the Triffids, the result is worldwide cultivation of Triffids. The narrative begins with Bill Mason in hospital, his eyes bandaged after having been splashed with Triffid poison from a stinger. During his convalescence, he is told of an unexpected green meteor shower. The next morning he learns that the light from the unusual display has rendered anyone who watched it completely blind. After recovering his sight, he wanders through an anarchic London full of blind inhabitants and slowly becomes enamoured of a wealthy novelist, Josella Clayton, whom he rescues after discovering her being forcibly used as a guide by a blind man. They join a group with whom they establish a self-sufficient colony in Sussex with some success, but they are constantly under threat from the Triffids, which mass around the fenced exterior. To discover what happens next, you'll need to read the story. Other British novels published in 1951 include The End of the Affair by Greene. The Question of Upbringing is the opening novel in Anthony Powell's A Dance to the Music of Time, a 12-volume cycle spanning much of the 20th century. And My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. Book number 3 was published in 1952. Doctor in the House is a comic novel by Richard Gordon, set in the fictitious St Swithin's Hospital in London. The story concerns the exploits and various pranks of a young medical student. In film adaptations, the character is named Simon Sparrow, but in the novel names him Richard Gordon. It is the first of a series of Doctor novels written by Gordon, himself a surgeon and an anaesthetist. It was rather a shock to the medical student to discover that once at the hospital he would actually have to work, and quite hard. Fortunately, he discovered that life at the hospital was not to be all dissection and textbooks. This hilarious hospital comedy is perfect reading for anyone who's ever wondered exactly what medical students get up to in their training. A film adaptation, Doctor in the House, was released in 1954, starring Dirk Bogarde. Several of the subsequent books were also filmed. There were a number of TV series very loosely based on the books, and a 13-part radio series on the BBC in 1968 starring Richard Briers as Sparrow. Other British novels published in 1952 include Lieutenant Hornblower by C.S. Forester. A Buyer's Market is the second novel in Anthony Powell's 12-novel series, A Dance to the Music of Time. Excellent Women by Barbara Pym, and Men at Arms by Evelyn Waugh. Book number 4 was published in 1953. Casino Royale is the first novel by Ian Fleming, and is the first James Bond book, and it paved the way for a further 11 novels and 2 short story collections by Fleming. The story concerns the British secret agent James Bond gambling at the casino in Royale les Eaux to bankrupt Le Chiffre, the treasurer of a French union and a member of the Russian Secret Service. Fleming used his wartime experiences as a member of the Naval Intelligence Division and the people he met during his work to provide plot elements. The character of Bond also reflected many of Fleming's personal tastes. Within the spy storyline, Casino Royale deals with themes of Britain's position in the world, particularly the relationship with the US in light of the defections to the Soviet Union of the British agents Guy Burgess and Donald Maclean. The book was given broadly positive reviews by critics at the time and sold out in less than a month after its UK release on the 13th of April 1953. Other British novels published in 1953 include The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley, Love Among the Ruins by Evelyn Waugh, and The Kraken Wakes by John Wyndham. Book number 5 was published in 1954. The Fellowship of the Ring is the first of 3 volumes of the epic novel The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. It is followed by The Two Towers and The Return of the King. It takes place in the fictional universe of Middle-earth. Other British novels published in 1954 include Lucky Jim, the first novel by Kingsley Amis, Lord of the Flies by William Golding, and Under the Net by Iris Murdoch. Book number 6 was published in 1955. That Uncertain Feeling is a comic novel by Kingsley Amis. In 1961, the book was made into a film starring Peter Sellers, with the title changed to Only Two Can Play. It was also adapted by the BBC in 1985 as a television series starring Dennis Lawson and Sheila Gish, this time with the original title. That Uncertain Feeling is a satire on life and culture in a Welsh seaside town. The story concerns a married librarian who begins an affair with the bored wife of a local bigwig. She is a chic socialite cruising like a predator on the prowl. She marks John Norris Lewis, an assistant librarian who seems to be an uncomplicated conquest, as an easy target. But Lewis is both more and less than he appears. Beneath this family man facade lurks a poet, wit and visionary, but also a lecher, for we soon find Lewis peering down the front of the socialised dress. No wonder he has that uncertain feeling. Other British novels published in 1955 include The Quiet American by Greene, Officers and Gentlemen, which is the second novel in Evelyn Waugh's Sword of Honour trilogy, and The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. Book number 7 was published in 1956. The Towers of Trebizond by Rose Macaulay was the last of her novels and the most successful. It was awarded the James Tate Black Memorial Prize for Fiction in the year of its publication. The book is partly autobiographical. It follows the adventures of a group of people: the narrator Laurie, the eccentric Dorothea Fawkes Corbett, otherwise Aunt Dot, her high Anglican clergyman friend Father Hugh Chantry Pig, travelling from Constantinople to Trebizond. A Turkish feminist doctor attracted to Anglicanism acts as a foil to the main characters. Aunt Dot proposes to emancipate the women of Turkey by converting them to Anglicanism and popularising the bathing hat, while Laurie has more worldly preoccupations. Against its Anglo-Catholic backdrop, the novel deals with the conflict between Laurie's attraction to Christianity and her adulterous love for a married man. This was the problem Macaulay had faced in her own life, having had an affair with the married novelist and former Roman Catholic priest Gerald O'Donovan from 1920 until his death in 1942. Other British novels published in 1956 include Diamonds Are Forever by Ian Fleming, Pincher Martin by William Golding, and French Leave by P.G. Wodehouse. Book number 8 was published in 1957. Room at the Top by John Braine is about the rise of an ambitious young man of humble origin and the socio-economic struggles undergone in realising his social ambitions in post-war Britain. Joe Lambton, demobilised at the end of the Second World War, is starting in a new job with the municipal treasury in the town of Worley. He has been a prisoner of war who spent his captivity studying to pass his accountancy examinations. He is an orphan whose parents were killed in an air raid against his hometown. He is determined to make something of himself, targeting a high-paid job with $1,000 a year salary. He notices shortly after arriving a young man with an expensive car and a pretty girlfriend, and he realises that this lifestyle and appearance is what he aspires to. The book centres on Joe's efforts to secure a future he can take pride in. The novel was made into a film with the excellent Lawrence Harvey as Joe Lambton and was also adapted as a BBC television film, both of which were very good. Other British novels published in 1957 include On the Beach by Nevil Shute. Justine is the first novel in Lawrence Durrell's literary tetralogy, The Alexandria Quartet. The Ordeal of Gilbert Pinfold by Evelyn Waugh, and The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. Book number 9 was published in 1958. Our Man in Havana by Greene is a novel set in Cuba. He makes fun of intelligence services, especially the British MI6, and their willingness to believe reports from their local informants. The book predates the Cuban Missile Crisis, but certain aspects of the plot, notably the role of missile installations, appear to anticipate the events of 1962. It was adapted into a film of the same name in 1959, directed by Carol Reed and starring Alec Guinness. Greene joined MI6 in August 1941. In London, Greene had been appointed to the subsection dealing with counter-espionage in the Iberian Peninsula, where he had learned about German agents in Portugal sending the Germans fictitious reports which garnered them expenses and bonuses to to add to their basic salary. One of the agents was Garbo, a Spanish double agent in Lisbon, who gave his German handlers disinformation by pretending to control a ring of agents all over England. In fact, he invented armed forces movements and operations from maps, guides and standard military references. Garbo was the main inspiration for Wormhole, the protagonist of Our Man in Havana. Remembering the German agents in Portugal, Greene wrote the first version of the story in 1946 as an outline for a film script, with the story set in Estonia in 1938. The film was never made, and Greene soon realised that Havana, which he had visited several times in the early 1950s, would be a much better setting, with the absurdities of the Cold War being more appropriate for a comedy. Other British novels published in 1958 include The Darling Buds of May by H.E. Bates, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning by Alan Silto, Hornblower in the West Indies by C.S. Forester, and Dr. No by Ian Fleming. Book number 10 was published in 1959, Billy Liar by Keith Waterhouse, which was later adapted into a play, a film, a musical and a TV series. The work has inspired and featured in a number of popular songs. The semi-comical story is about William Fisher, a working-class 19-year-old living in the fictional town of Stradhoughton in Yorkshire. Bored by his job as a lowly clerk for an undertaker, Billy spends his time indulging in fantasies and dreams of life in the big city as a comedy writer. Billy is living with parents Alice and Geoffrey and his grandmother Florence Boothroyd. Billy lies compulsively to everyone he comes across, whether it's the claim that his father is a retired naval captain or telling his parents that Arthur's mother has broken her leg. Billy and Billy's best friend Arthur work as clerks for undertakers Shadrach and Duxbury. Billy is engaged to 2 girls and in love with the third, and he constantly refers to a vague job offer writing scripts in London for comedian Danny Boone. Billy feels trapped by his boring job and working-class parents and finds that his only happiness lies in grand plans for his future and fantastical daydreams of the fictional country of Ambrosia. Other British novels published in 1959 include Goldfinger by Ian Fleming and Titus Alone by Mervyn Peake. If you are new to this channel, then you may want to check out the previous videos in this series, which you'll find in the info cards above. Also, I recommend that you check out my booktuber friend NIKKI, who has a wonderful channel called I Read Past My Bedtime. I'll leave a link to her channel in the show notes below.